All right, we'll get started. Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Strengthening Civil Society in a Global Crisis. My name is Kristina Gawrgy Campbell. I'm the Vice President of Communications and Marketing at Independent Sector. I will be facilitating the discussion to ensure we stay on time and help facilitate the questions at the end. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome and thank you. Independent Sector is a national membership organization representing a diverse set of nonprofits, foundations, and corporate giving programs working to ensure all people in the United States thrive. Today, we're joined by our President and CEO, Dan Cardinali, and our colleagues at Givingtuesday, Asha, Curran, and Woodrow, Rosenbaum. As part of the webinar, you are all on mute. Please ask your questions using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will take those at the end. The webinar is being recorded and we will send a link to you, and it will also be available on the IS website within 24 hours of the end of this webinar. Please also make sure to take the survey. It will pop up on your screen as you exit, and it will also be emailed to you. That will help us ensure we provide you better content and resources in the future. And with that, I will turn it over to Dan.
Thanks, Kristina, and thank you all for being here. As needs rapidly shift, Independent Sector is quickly adapting to being responsive to our community. This is our strategic footing. Independent Sector will strengthen our position as a catalytic organization where changemaker community can collectively take action. We do this in kind of four key ways. First, we want to listen carefully and expansively. We've got an extraordinary network of folks, and people have been incredibly generous with sending in their inputs and guidance to us. We want to make clear to you what we're hearing and what we're learning. We reflect this analysis back to you and the community, and then we build a shared agenda together and try and be responsive. So we look to you all to help prompt what the needs are, and many of you are extraordinary resources. We ask that you join with us in two ways. First, you can visit our independentsector.org/COVID-19 to learn about what is being offered, what is going on, and how to take action and engage with us. We've curated a list of resources and articles that we hope you'll find helpful, including information about how to apply for the relief through the CARES Act, our collective advocacy effort for COVID-19 relief, and additional resources to manage your organization during this pandemic. You can also visit the independentsector.org/membership, a part of the website, to consider becoming a member. Currently, we've provided these resources freely to everyone in the sector, but we want you to be a long-term partner of ours and join with us in helping shape the public policy agenda for the future, and also help kind of co-create and develop understanding of what the trends are happening across the sector, kind of muster our collective understanding and our voice. So we need you to join, to engage, and be part of our community. With that, I want to turn it over to Asha and Woodrow from Givingtuesday. We've done a huge amount of work with them in the past. I hold both of them in exceedingly high regard, and we think that they have really stepped into a powerful leadership role at this time to partner with nonprofits to unleash civil society's capacity to be a real force for healing and impact at this time. With that, I will turn it over to Asha and Woodrow.
I hope everybody can hear me okay. Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you, Kristina, for having us today. Sorry for the circumstances that bring us all together, and I hope everybody who's attending this webinar is as safe and well as is possible at this time. I always love to have an opportunity to talk about Givingtuesday. I certainly wish it was for a happier reason than this. And I'm glad to be here with my colleague Woodrow, since measurement is a very important part of everything that we're trying to plan around this new effort. So just as a tiny bit of background, I never want to assume that people are too familiar with the totality of what Givingtuesday is. There's a common perception that it is a fundraising day, but it is really far more than that. It is a global movement focused on deeply networked grassroots generosity. Sorry, somebody controlling my...
No, I'm jumping in here, Asha, because we didn't have your slides, so I'm helping out.
Okay, so you're going to advance for me?
Yeah, why don't we just do that, and that way we don't have to sort out the sharing.
Okay, sorry about that. So Giving Tuesday is not just one day. It's about all types of giving and not just donations. It has grown into a year-round global generosity movement with leaders who have launched more than 200 community campaigns. That means very hyper-local campaigns that are in small towns, in large cities, in entire states, and true of other countries as well. And there are movements in over 70 countries at this point. At a very grassroots level, people and organizations participate in Giving Tuesday in every country of the world in countless ways. The idea is to be generous in whatever way feels right to each person, to each organization. On the last Giving Tuesday, which was December 3rd, 2019, there was more than $2 billion generated in that period of time. That's just in the United States, and just what we are able to count. So really a tremendous spike in giving. Go ahead, Woodrow. So one thing that we've realized through our years running Giving Tuesday is that our network of leaders, those leaders in those 70 countries and all of those communities and all of the leaders that we don't even have direct contact with in nonprofit organizations, have this incredible power to mobilize people. And as we watched this pandemic unfold and cause so much suffering and chaos and uncertainty, and certainly put the nonprofit sector in an extraordinary amount of peril in a very short period of time, we knew that this was an unprecedented moment, and we were at the same time really inspired by all of these spontaneous acts of generosity that we were seeing happen all over the world. It was really remarkable. And I hope that's a common experience among people who are watching today. We saw people, yearning to connect and to help and to give, to lift other people up when they were isolated themselves. And we saw those moments being shared and replicated. And that is sort of what we do, is to help coalesce around those sort of efforts and to bring them to scale. And that's where we felt that we could really lend, some value here. And we thought about the best way for Giving Tuesday to respond and about what role we should play. And we listened to our network of leaders and our network of movement builders. And we decided to move forward with Giving Tuesday now, when partners around the world reached out to us to help galvanize a response to this moment. And we wanted to be thoughtful about when to do it, and we wanted to be thoughtful about if we should do it. We recognized that for some it would be challenging, but we decided on balance, and not in a vacuum, but with our broader networks, that we should do what we do, which is assemble a global group of partners and on-the-ground leaders to collaboratively drive a massive spike of generosity and civic engagement, and business and philanthropic activation, and of course support for communities and the social sector all around the world. And so Giving Tuesday now became an official thing, planned for May 5th of 2020. And the basic premise of it is really, really simple. We believe generosity has the power to heal and unite communities in good times and in bad. And that's why we created this day. Again, we do everything in a very collaborative fashion. What you're looking at now is simply some of the partners who we are launching with, who are coming together in all kinds of different ways, not only fundraising related ways, some of them very, very specifically focused on that. Some are really looking at mobilizing their global networks, some really able to help out in a corporate or a platform capacity, and this is kind of what Giving Tuesday looked like in its original form as well. We launched Giving Tuesday in 2012 in this very collaborative way, by drawing together all of these partners who could all benefit from it in some sort of different way. And we're very proud, in particular, that the World Health Organization COVID-19 Solidarity Fund and the CDC Foundation are both part of the launch of this effort, and we are very lucky to be supported by the Gates Foundation and PayPal, among others. So obviously this is a core part of what we believe. Giving Tuesday is not only about civil society organizations; it's also about people and about communities. But But really importantly right now, we do believe that a healthy civil society is the foundation of a healthy society, period. And that how resilient we can be in this moment is largely going to be reflected by how resilient civil society organizations can be. And so we really want to do everything we can to make sure that organizations are successful, that they feel that they have the support that they need. It doesn't make sense for every organization to participate. You know, if an organization's immediate reaction to this day is panic, absolutely, you know, to feel free to bypass it totally. You know, I think there's also looking at what each organization is trying to achieve. You know, people are looking to you, and they're looking to you to help you, to look to you to help them, to stay connected, to heal. And so there are so many different ways to participate, both in fundraising and in other ways. The way we're working with our launch partners is to connect them with our local and our national networks, with our hundreds of community campaigns across the US. So really plugging them into those hyper-local campaigns that can activate on that local level. We are also connecting them to all of our global networks, all of our 70 countries. Everybody is supporting one another. Everybody is working highly collaboratively. We are plugging into national and global affinity groups, or what we sometimes think of as Giving Tuesday sub-movements. A couple of examples of those are Giving Tuesday Military, which is a totally grassroots effort. In other words, it was not started by us. It is supported and amplified by us. But the goal of it is to inspire acts of generosity on military bases around the world. They did tremendous things for Giving Tuesday 2019 and are activating around May 5th as well. Likewise, Giving Tuesday Kids is an effort that was started by a 13-year-old girl, then 12, in Oakland, California. She got in touch with us. She said, I want to do Giving Tuesday Kids and inspire generosity led by children all over the world. We thought that was amazing. She and her network of Giving Tuesday Kids will activate in all kinds of creative ways around May 5th as well. Again, the power of Giving Tuesday Military and Giving Tuesday Kids, which are just two examples of these sort of affinity groups, is their ability to form strong networks among themselves, to think of amazing creative ideas, and then to work to replicate and rapidly adopt and scale them. We're also working with the many mutual aid networks that sort of sprung up spontaneously after this crisis exploded, things like giving circles. So where there is a giving effort, we are plugging our partners and ourselves into that giving effort. One thing that we emphasize with Giving Tuesday since minute one, and really emphasize even more now, is how important it is to collaborate with other organizations. If you look at this as a heavy lift that you as an organization have to do entirely on your own, it really is just a bridge too far right now. Also, collaborative efforts are more fun, and they tend to be a lot more successful, and they yield better learnings and better data. There's just no reason not to do them. Our basic advice to organizations that want to craft something meaningful for May 5th, whether that is a fundraising effort or something else, is to think of something that is doable, right? That is executable in this short period of time. Something that shows how relevant you are, your issue, your cause, your work. Creativity is just always the thing that drives a Giving Tuesday campaign home like nothing else does. Creativity speaks to people, it engages them, it invites them to be part of what you're doing. And then lastly, urgency, that what's happening now really relies on the participation and help of every single person in our society and in our world. And whatever the tactics are that are driven by what you decide to do will be different, right? Whether it's fundraising or whether it's awareness raising or audience building or recruitment. But I think that no campaign will succeed in this particular environment without those three characteristics. It's possible to use Giving Tuesday now to thank people or to deepen connections with supporters rather than try to raise money for them. The great thing that we've found about those kinds of campaigns is that they actually raise money, right? So campaigns that we've seen that organizations do to thank people often result in them being given money. So sometimes fundraising can be a little bit more subtle than we think. Kindness initiatives, community education. Some of our communities are doing things like drawing messages of support for other families in chalk on the sidewalk, printing out rainbows or hearts and hanging them in the window with messages of solidarity and support, lifting up stories of community resilience so that other people can replicate those stories, convening communities through shared experience that is more and more happening online. So as we think about ways to engage communities, I would just pass it over to my colleague Woodrow to share a bit about what we know about giving trends, what we've learned about individual giving behavior that is really relevant to this moment, and how the data on giving in moments like these can help us understand what to expect, how to act accordingly, and how to think about next time. Over to you, Woodrow.
Thanks, Asha. So we see one of our roles here as being really to understand what the current trends are, where the opportunities are to assist the sector in navigating what is pretty uncertain time and a unique environment, both for better and for worse. And our data efforts are now include 80 collaborators in the US in 9 working groups and teams in 47 countries. So we've got really good reach and a lot of collaborative partners to help us to get a picture of this and in more or less real time kind of report on what we're seeing. And there are some findings from past Giving Tuesdays that we think are relevant and important to remember right now. And one of those is that people by and large are generous and that generous people give. So and the reason I mentioned this is that although there are indicators that we may see some suppression of individual giving, that we're not really tapping out the full capacity of people to give in most instances. So looking at what could be a real long slog through an economic downturn, and I'll talk about what some of the indicators are there. Remembering that if we can capture more of the total capacity, even if that capacity is lower, there is still upside potential there for our organizations to capture more support. And one of the key things there is this, we just think is a best practice. Giving Tuesday data is very clear that people want to engage in multiple ways. They want a connection to the causes they support that is more than just transactional. So for example, on Giving Tuesday, we see that most people do more than one thing. Those that participate are more likely to do at least a couple of things. And that just giving money is actually the least common behavior. The majority of the donors are also taking some other kind of action. So when we think about how to engage, we know that it's important that we provide those multiple touch points, and to think about this not as a burden, not as an additional ask that is onerous on our supporters, but rather to help our supporters exercise what our Romanian leaders called our fundamental human need to give. And when we think about it in that way, that we're providing opportunity to exercise that need, it just changes the entire approach of engagement over transaction with supporters. And I think it's really important because we see that even in years where giving is either flat or reduced in the US, Giving Tuesday has still grown during those years. We've still seen more givers and more dollars donated on those years, and a positive shift in the donation behavior of those donors, even when the overall environment is contracting. Last year, we estimate that at least 27 million US adults participated in Giving Tuesday in some way, 13.5 million donated, 7.6 million volunteered. These are the minimum estimates. 13% of the US population that's choosing to take part in something. And this leads us to understanding, I think, some best practices that are going to be important in dealing with our current crisis. when we look back at other shocks to the system, you know, we've looked at our own data, we've looked at research by others at situations like what happened after 9/11 and past economic downturns and recessions. And one of the things that's clear is that by and large, the nonprofit sector is quite resilient, actually. It doesn't seem to be as impacted by economic downturn as other sectors are. It's quicker to recover as a whole. But there are definitely some risks. And one of the things that we see is often a concentration of giving into certain cause areas, which obviously leaves some subsectors at increased risk. And definitely, you know, a suppression of an overall suppression of individual giving that, you know, although there may be resilience there, that's small consolation to the organization that can no longer operate because they're below the threshold at which they're viable. And so although there are some mitigating factors, I think there are definitely some risks ahead. There are a number of caveats to that I'll get to in a minute. Another, I think, important thing to recognize is that research has shown that in the last recession, we saw donor-advised funds were a significant source of resilience within the sector. And since 2008, 2009, those donor-advised funds have grown enormously. And I think this is really critically important. If I was a fundraiser, I would be looking very carefully at where the opportunities lie to tap into that money that has already been donated. In a lot of ways, we can see this as the rainy day fund for the sector. And for many organizations, the rainy day has come. So I think that is one really clear example of where there is latent resilience. So that said, I think there's only so much value in looking at these past shocks because we are in a different situation now, both for better and for worse. This is bigger and broader. And when I say also for better, I mean, we are seeing a spontaneous upswelling of new generosity, new giving, new collective action. Foundations are stepping up, companies are stepping up. People around the world are looking for opportunities to give. And so when I talk about we weren't tapping the full capacity to give from individuals prior to this, I think now what we have is an opportunity to mitigate some of the likely suppressive result of the economy by tapping into this new motivation people are finding to act. So we're trying to really quantify that as much as possible. So our objectives are to help the sector to plot a course, first of all, through mitigation. And we're standing up methodology right now to understand where can we have scalable intervention that is going to help right now to mitigate the effect on the sector and on our communities. That's going to really help to ramp up the immediate response. This then helps us to transition into advising on what the recovery modes are. And so whereas I think there is some value, but it's some limited value in looking at these past situations in terms of forecasting, what we can do is say, all right, well, we observed certain indicators in past situations that were indicative of either specific risks or opportunities. And so as we observe these indicators appearing over the next couple of months, that hopefully gives us an opportunity to say, hey, look, we've got some signal here that might indicate where our partners need to lean in or opportunities for recovery. So we're going to try to be really proactive in providing that kind of insight to the sector, and we're working with our partners right now to stand that up. And then ultimately, really, our goal here is that we take advantage of the new flexibility, agility, collaboration, innovation, capacity, and interest in giving, the new grassroots and collective action that we're seeing to, as much as possible, realize a positive legacy from this crisis. You know, the fact that people are coming together in new ways and are looking to heal their communities, I think, is an enormous opportunity for us as a sector to look at coming out of this with different practice and different cultures of giving. And so our goal will be to help to plot that course and provide the data and insight that are necessary in order to understand. And so some of the tools that we're investing in now to do this is, first of all, a lot of social listening. So we have some new tools, and we're right now examining what is the conversation and how can that tell us what we should be monitoring. Giving Tuesday now is actually a really fantastic opportunity for us to generate some signal in the noise by deliberately trying things and by working with our partners to understand what they're trying, and to then just look at the conversation and see what's actually coalescing. What's motivating people? Working with our partners to then make the connection between those conversations and that topic monitoring to real action. And so we can identify what the through line is. We are also fortunate to have tools that allow us to backdate our social listening research by 15 months, which means we can look for the things that emerge now and compare them to a year ago without having to know last year that we needed to look for this stuff. So this is going to be really valuable in us being able to understand what does that trend look like. The other thing we're doing in order to help contextualize what we're seeing is survey research. So we're asking people about their values, about their attitudes, about their proximity to the crisis, about their outlook, and their behavior. So we have some real clear indicators from past research on what drives people's intention to give. So we're going to be looking for that signal and identifying what are the things that are driving that shifts in that attitude and those values, so that we can report back to the sector on where the opportunity is to make a positive impact there. And then we get lots of direct giving behavior. So we're aggregating that. We're working with our partners to collect transaction data and data on volunteer behavior, so we can really close the loop on what the actual impact of all of this is, and where we can maintain momentum past May 5th and through the rest of the year. So although we are in a somewhat unpredictable environment, we think that there are some significant opportunities that we can leverage, and some learning from past Giving Tuesdays that can help us navigate this right now as organizations. And the first is offering multiple ways to give. We already know that that's what donors want, and increasingly this is their desire. So we think this is just a best practice. This is more critically important now. If people have less money to give them other ways to engage with you is just an obvious no-brainer. Also, strengthening relationships is going to be what makes us resilient in the mid to long term. So lots of touch points, lots of interaction, thinking about your community of givers as partners in your mission and not just your checkbook is going to be that much more important than ever. Right now, you're not really relevant if you don't have a COVID story, but everybody has a COVID story. So understanding how you tie your engagement into and make it relevant and tell that narrative. Give to me because COVID is not a very compelling ask. Just like give to me because it's Giving Tuesday is not a particularly compelling ask. It might be better than nothing, but it's not very good. So I really encourage organizations to think about, what are the personal connections? How am I part of a community? And to maybe even think about how you can blur the lines between giver and receiver. We're in this fight together. We all have needs and we all have something to give. And that's true of every organization as well. So thinking about how you're going to craft a narrative about your role in the recovery and your need is going to be really important to make it relevant right now. And everybody has that opportunity, and it's in your mission. And then sharing opportunities. So letting people know how they can help you, and how you can help, and to make sure that everyone knows that we're taking this collective global moment for unity is what's going to give it power. So this is connected to just use the hashtag, use Giving Tuesday now as this inflection point. If the more we're talking about this collective moment, the more we raise the total volume, and it helps everybody's campaign to do so. Asha spoke about collaboration. We see this really clearly on Giving Tuesday every year. organizations that choose to come together and support one another do much better. And it's really part of the magic behind Giving Tuesday is that we're providing this opportunity for collective action that lifts all boats. The data show it's good for the sector, it's best for the organizations that participate and collaborate, and it shifts people's giving behavior positively. We're going to need to do that if we're going to navigate this crisis successfully. So if you're already in market, if you're already engaging people, this can be an inflection point in your campaign. It can be that crescendo moment that gets you to the new threshold of continued action. If you're trying to figure out how you get in the conversation, this is a moment to tell your story. And for many organizations, what we're hearing is it's an opportunity to add a new dimension to what they're already talking about. So if you're asking somebody for money every day, maybe Giving Tuesday is an opportunity to say thank you, to do something else, to have your organization give back, to lift up some other organization or coalition or cause area, but just adding new dimension and helps your supporters to understand that you're more than just a bucket for money, that you are, like them, experiencing and collaborating within this global moment of need. So those some best practices. Asha, we're just going to talk about the Starling Fund, I think, for a moment. Do you want to say a couple of words about that?
Yeah, sure. So the Starling Fund is a fund that we set up at Giving Tuesday to micro grant, essentially, to some of our network of nonprofits and community campaign leaders and global leaders. And we're really prioritizing regions that are operating on very low resource, high poverty regions, and regions that are in active crisis, because we recognize that in this moment, $1,500 or $5,000 can make a huge difference, and that is especially true in certain specific regions. We're also prioritizing campaigns that are especially innovative in this moment, and that doesn't equate to complicated, but ones that are particularly inspiring or meaningful or heartwarming or ultimately scalable. Ones that really have a plan for setting goals and being able to measure how those campaigns worked, but at the same time being very lean and very experimental. So we're very, very glad that we're able to do this. We set that fund up out of money in our own budget. We simply moved it from other places, but we are actively fundraising to be able to add to it, so that we can make this strategy something that we can do to help organizations in a broader way, even beyond May 5th. And the reason that we call it the Starling Fund is that starlings are birds that are known to form patterns called murmuration, which are kind of inexplicable, but that they work in hundreds or thousands of birds at a time to form incredibly unique and beautiful patterns. So we think that collaboration can affect that same kind of impact.
And like all of our work, we're using this as an opportunity to test and measure something. So this is a fairly new, agile micro-granting process. There's measurement built into it, but it is all very low lift. And so we're really interested in seeing what the overall impact of that is and how that structure of granting these leadership networks that we're already engaged with ended up generating easily deployable impact. It's an experiment, but we'll be able to kind of report back not just on the results of this, but also on the result of having that approach. So I think we're ready to hand it over for some Q&A.
Great, thank you all so much. That was great. A lot of great information, I think, for organizations to take and run with. Before we turn to the Q&A, and folks, please send your questions in. I want to give Dan an opportunity to see if he had any reflections or if you had any questions for Asha and Woodrow.
So first of all, I want to thank both of you for the thoughtful presentation and honestly being behind a massive movement. So my reflection is that it is extraordinary to see a through line in what you were saying, which is, yes, we're using data, and this is a technologically driven platform that allows us to catalyze actual real life activity, people and relationships. And I think sometimes we see those as two. You either do the technological thing or you see, the kind of in-person thing. And I think at this time when we're in social isolation, you all are providing an opportunity for us to kind of thread those two together in a way that is appropriate for the environment that we're trying to kind of navigate. So I just want to highlight that as another, probably not anticipated innovation of Giving Tuesday and how this works. The second thing that I just want to reflect on is this notion that it is not all about the money. It's actually all about the strength of our community. And money and activity and aligned contribution all are just kind of fibers that weave together. And there is a sense that you all kind of provide lots of the threads, but you're really saying, community, weave these together in the way that is appropriate for you all. Strengthen your community on your own terms, use your own innovation. And yet you can be part of something that's both national and global, that we as individuals with private action for public good aren't doing this ever in isolation. So I just want to hold up a mirror and thank you both, because I think we sometimes lose sight in the minute of a crisis to be like, oh my God, how am I going to pay? How am I going to make payroll? Or those kids need clothes, or oh my God, these seniors are in dire situation. All that is true, but if we lose sight of the way we proceed, as just as important as what we do, and I think you're offering a phenomenal opportunity for us to bring those together. So I just want to thank you. I do have one question for you. So bring it down to, I'm the first time on here. I'm in a community where I have no idea where I might turn to look for ways to connect Giving Tuesday to my work. I'm a nonprofit. I have 3 employees. This is the first time I'm really being aware of it. What do I do to kind of get connected or pull down tools, or how to make this real today for myself?
Woodrow, why don't you take that one?
Well, I mean, the first thing is to go to now.givingtuesday.org, because we've got resources and tools and information, right? So start there. Second thing would be, this conversation is very much on social media, and that's always true, but even more so now that you can't go outside. So like, get in the channels and just get in the conversation. Asha pointed out that she talked about the fact that the right thing to do is what you have capacity for. And we're seeing enormous campaigns ramp up, and we're seeing people who are just taking a moment to reflect in the midst of a total crisis. So all of that is right. There's no right size of this, and that's one of the things that makes Giving Tuesday all the time so effective, is that you do what you can. That's the right amount to do, and that's less important than how big or what it is. That said, set a goal. We've seen very clearly that organizations that set a measurable goal do much, much better on Giving Tuesday than those that don't. It is the primary driver of success is setting that measurable goal. And I think that one of the reasons for that is when you think about what you're going to do, and it makes you think about how you're going to measure that. And that then gets you deploying tactics that get you to the end result, because you had to be able to measure it. And just so go to the site, get your stuff, do something, get in the conversation, set a goal. Doesn't matter then what the scale of that is. If you do those things, you're going to be golden.
Pretty good. All right.
I would just also add to that one of the most common kind of misperceptions is often that to be successful on any Giving Tuesday day, you have to have a massive marketing budget and tons of staff and be a huge organization. And in our experience, that's not true at all. And in fact, smaller organizations are often the ones that are better able to be innovative and be creative, because they lack the hierarchy and bureaucracy and inherent really long and drawn out processes, right, that bigger organizations often do have. Some of our earliest successes, the organizations that we told the stories of for years were, one called the Badass Brooklyn Animal Shelter, with literally 0 paid staff. They were an all volunteer organization, but because of the creativity of their all Instagram campaign, they had their most successful day ever. Another early one was an organization called Dress for Success, which supplies women returning to the workforce with clothing, and they were the first to adapt Giving Tuesday and create it as Giving Shoes Day, and they had an incredible amount of success. So again, like that ability to like kind of rapidly deploy an idea and get it out into the marketplace as an MVP, right? Minimum viable product is like that kind of thing is actually invaluable and very, very within the reach of small organizations.
And it shows up in the data. Smaller organizations get twice the share of wallet of Givingtuesday donations compared to what they get all year. So they're way out, they're punching above their weight on
Well, that's
Givingtuesday.
interesting.
It really is about those small to mid-sized orgs.
So one last just comment, and then Christine, we can turn it for questions. But so we often talk at Independent Sector about this notion of democratizing giving, right? And we know that there's been a trend, unfortunately, if you look at the charitable donations, that fewer people are giving, and the ones that are giving large amounts, which is great that there's generosity. And you all are a counterforce to that small organizations or just the common person can jump in and actually both do something and create an opportunity for other people to either do something and or donate, which is fantastic. Christina, do you want to
Yep, so we got a good number of questions here. So one of the first is, what do you say to a fundraising team that says Givingtuesday is about raising money and not about relationships? So it's not where I'm going to, put my time. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say Givingtuesday is demonstrably not just about raising money. I mean, because you're talking about democratizing giving. I mean, one thing is true, that the majority of campaigns are just financial asks. And that's fine. Like, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But because that's not how the majority of the action takes place, I think it's really important to understand that the donors drive Givingtuesday. The donors take lots of action. Only giving money is the least common behavior. So it is clearly mostly about a whole other set of engagements, right? So if you think it's only about money, that's probably more a reflection of practice than it is of the environment or the opportunity. And actually, to your point, Dan, there's one time of the year where we don't see a contraction of giving into fewer and fewer hands, and that's on Givingtuesday, where it's more people giving more smaller gifts for a really big impact. And one of the things I'll say is I hear from a lot of fundraisers, they'll say, I'm worried about this fact that there's fewer and fewer givers. But if you ask them who they're asking for money, they're asking a very small subset of people who are giving the most money. This is becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sector. If those are the people who are asking for money, those are the people that are going to give. It turns out if you show up and give people a compelling opportunity to get involved, they show up.
I'll add to that, and I knew Woodrow would have an answer to it, that, for major gifts officers, there's actually no better time to solicit a major gift and deploy it as a matching gift, right? From whether that's from major donors or from a board of directors. If you can say like let's collectively, pitch in whatever amount of money is big for whatever organization, it's very likely to get matched, right? People like matches. It's like the lowest hanging fruit there is for a giving day is to deploy matches, and that's where major gifts can come in really, really usefully. I also just can't resist saying that just from my vantage point, Givingtuesday is far more about relationships than it is about anything else.
And another question, this could be, this could be materials you have on your website, but what would you suggest is a good ramp up strategy to May 5th, which is only a few weeks away now?
So we're looking into this as well. We're trying to release as many of those kinds of recommended timelines and toolkits and playbooks as we can. And then of course they are completely adapted to, whatever an organization needs, but we certainly have all of those recommendations on the website, a complete activation toolkit. And we've always worked that way. Like we put all these tools and resources out and then people change them and do different things. And that's terrific.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that obviously the time frame is a lot shorter now. And there's even more reason to sort of work this into whatever you're already doing for just lots of logistical reasons. I mean, typically think about, you want to tell your supporters, first of all, set a goal, in case I didn't mention that. But tell your various constituencies that it's a thing and what their role is going to be. Your board, your volunteers, right? Like what is the bit that they're going to do to enable to contribute to that goal? Then broadcast, right? We're doing it. Here's as soon as possible. This is, we're launching. This is what we're doing. This is where we hope to be on May 5th. And now's the time to do it. Just get rolling. But it's a thing, what you can do, here we go. and then just talk it up on May 5th as much as you can.
And another question is, how does it connect? How does Giving Tuesday now connect to Giving Tuesday that presumably will happen at the end of the year?
So I'm really glad you or somebody else asked that. There's a kind of rumor spreading that this is an instead of Giving Tuesday and not an and Giving Tuesday, and it's not. It's Giving Tuesday on December 1st. Okay. I should probably know that. Whatever. Yes.
Tuesday after Thanksgiving.
The Tuesday after Thanksgiving is still going to happen. This is an emergency. This is why we feel like we need not just a day of giving, but a day of unity is the reason we did this. But it doesn't change anything about regular Giving Tuesday plans. And in fact, our ultimate strategy is that it's not once a year or twice a year, but it's every week, that there's just a huge spike in generosity and kindness every Tuesday.
And is there an application for the Starling Fund?
Should have specified that at this moment, the Starling Fund is for our existing network of community and country leaders. It's really going to depend on how much we can raise for it. I think ultimately we would love to be able to expand it past that immediate circle, but that's what it is right now, just because we have to microgrant very quickly, and that's our sort of known quantity of folks.
And has Facebook or any other partner agreed to do matching donations or participate in any sort of way on the day of?
Facebook is a launch partner, so they have already committed to participating on the day of, and probably in the ramp up too, but we don't have any more information than that yet.
Great.
There are we're certainly hearing about lots of matching funds that are being set up, either just sort of COVID funds with multiple organizations in them that foundations are setting up, or corporate connections with specific organizations or funds. There's certainly a lot of that going on, but not so much. We're not seeing so much sort of blanket, this is open to every donor, but it's still possible that some of that stuff will surface.
And could you said this a little bit earlier, I think, Woodrow, in your presentation, that everybody has a COVID story, but I do wonder how organizations who don't feel like they directly are part of the relief effort right now can mobilize folks to participate during this time.
So early data from some of our partners who are really in it, like have a broad set of causes on their platforms, really have shown that the support from communities really follows the trajectory of the virus. And in the US, a lot of that money was essentially going to the health organizations really on the front line. And that has transitioned, that continues to be very strong, but now we're also seeing those sort of secondary organizations, the food banks and the homeless shelters that are dealing with the secondary impacts of the crisis, both economic and health, that they're very strong right now. The current transition seems to be peaking, or not peaking right now, ramping up right now, is response to the other organizations, including, interestingly, small businesses and groups of employees through some of these platforms. Think arts organizations, right? That the community is starting to recognize these are important components of my community. I think in actually a lot of ways we're starting to learn who is on our, it's like when bad stuff happens, you really learn who your friends are. We're starting to really recognize who our community is, right? We're thinking about the person in the grocery store as a member of our community in a way that we probably didn't before. And we're seeing this in people's donation behavior already. So supporting small businesses, supporting small arts organizations, this kind of those people and organizations in our community that are part of the fabric that we recognize as victims of this. So I think the hope is that Giving Tuesday now gives you that opportunity to say, we're in this too. If it were me, if I was an arts organization, I would be thinking about a dual message of how I'm giving back, how I'm helping support my community every day and through this crisis. And this is my need, and this is why it's so critical right now.
Well, and also what I see arts organizations doing, certainly ones here in New York, which I just find incredibly moving, is they're suffering, right? And they're in peril, and they're really thinking about what they have to do. But at the same time, they're thinking about how they can get the arts out to all of the people who are sitting at home alone. And that's, you know, like such a powerful force for healing, right? Just the other day I watched Lincoln Center put on Bolero via Zoom, you know, from the living room of this entire orchestra. And it was just amazing. And I see organizations doing that left and right. So it's not just appeals for money. It's not just help us, we're as critical as a, you know, as a food bank, but it is also like, wait, we really do exist to make people's lives better through music and dance or whatever it is. And we're going to keep doing that even through these challenging times. And ultimately, I think that effort is going to speak to people in a really powerful way.
Great. And this question actually relates, Asha, to something you were talking about prior to even us launching the webinar, which is how do you incorporate Giving Tuesday now when you already have a fundraising campaign planned, let's say in May, so not far from the date. So how do you not muddy the message, and how do you do both?
Do you want to answer that first, Woodrow?
Sure. I think to a degree it depends on kind of where you are in that campaign. But I think it is important to recognize that Giving Tuesday is not a giving day, right? It's a moment and it's a movement. So I think if you're doing something that is going to peak or end after May 5th, I think about how you can add awareness to it, add an additional ask, add another dimension to the engagement. We're seeing a lot of big campaigns that are happening later in May that are using this as a sort of ramp up moment. If you're mid-campaign, this is just a good opportunity to set a mid-campaign goal, to get a big peak of activity, like some of our other organizations that are in major fundraising mode right now, do something a little bit different to help just break the monotony of the constant ask. So I think really what you want to think about is, I've got a campaign arc, and wherever May 5th falls, there's going to be a spike. So how can I leverage that for most impact?
You know, it's interesting. It's kind of similar to when we first launched Giving Tuesday, and one of the immediate reactions that we got was like, wait, what about December 31st? That's our major giving day. Like that's been in our calendar since the 17th century, and what we're possibly going to do about this new day at the beginning of December. But it ended up being that actually Giving Tuesday is a really useful bookend, right, for the giving season, right, to kind of pull back so that giving is not the last thing that people are thinking about on December 31st in the year, but they're actually thinking about it earlier, and to launch some kind of campaign that has some kind of really nice narrative arc between Giving Tuesday and December 31st. So it might be interesting to think about it just in terms of the same thing, but really important, I think, to know as a strong message from us that we want everybody's giving efforts to be successful. We're not here to usurp anybody's giving efforts. We want to only be additive.
And remember, people want more touch points. Give them more opportunities to engage with you. It's not about you've got your one kick at the can. This is an opportunity that we've manufactured an extra touch point. And that's hugely valuable because it gives you a reason to be in people's lives. And so that's the most important thing, is it's not an either or. And you should always be looking for those additional touch points and connections. Here's one that's ready-made for you.
For what it's worth, I think I'll share the independent sector last year. Giving Tuesday, pushed out an advocacy push about giving, and use that as a touch point to let people know that they could take action with their members of Congress and ask for better policies around charitable giving. So, do you have any other examples of organizations who've done like advocacy work through the day as well?
Some of the organizations that are really focused on effective philanthropy and impact have used Giving Tuesday as an opportunity to really get into a conversation with donors about thinking about your giving and how your support is effective. And interestingly, if you look at GuideStar has their biggest day ever for people searching background information about nonprofits. Every year, Giving Tuesday is a record-breaking year for the number of searches so it is a very thoughtful time for giving. I think part of the reason for that is those organizations are entering into a conversation. So it's not necessarily a policy thing, but it's another dimension of the sort of philanthropic landscape. This is a time to talk about your mission and your point of view around giving, whatever that is.
Great. Well, I think, we're nearing the end. Does anybody have any sort of final thoughts before we thank everyone and let them go on their way?
Well, I do see this question about from somebody who has never received their funds from the November Facebook Giving Tuesday fundraiser. I don't have an answer for this, but my non-answer is really the answer. Facebook and Giving Tuesday are not the same organization. There's sometimes a conception that Giving Tuesday is a Facebook campaign, and it's not. Facebook activates for Giving Tuesday just like millions of other organizations activate for Giving Tuesday. So we always feel terrible that we can't be more helpful when questions like that come up, but we're just not the same organization and we just don't have the answers. But I do wish everybody on this the best, and thank you, Dan and Kristina, for having us. And whether everybody participates in May 5th or not, I hope everybody stays well and safe.
Well, thank you, Woodrow and Asha, for your leadership. I mean, you've mentioned this a number of times. This is a generosity movement. This is a moment where people can step forward with other people, rooted in their own community and kind of doing amazing work. And so I just want to thank you on behalf of those of us who care about the health of civil society. You all are, you know, that weaving fabric that is strengthening it. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks so much, Dan.
Thank you all. And for folks who are signing off, don't forget to look at independentsector.org/COVID-19 for more resources, and now.givingtuesday.org. And as you sign off, please take our survey. And with that, have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.